The courtroom of Jefferson County Superior Court was built to intimidate. High ceilings arched overhead like a cathedral of law, polished oak panels lining the walls, flags standing stiff in their corners. Every sound echoed, the shuffle of papers, the creak of benches, the low murmur of strangers pressed shoulder to shoulder. On most days, it swallowed people whole. On this morning, it was waiting for something no one could explain. The case had drawn attention from the start. A late-night armed robbery, a wounded store clerk, a suspect with a violent record who swore he'd been framed, and a police dog, an elite K-9 named Rex, whose identification of the attacker was the prosecution's strongest evidence. Some called it heroic, others called it unreliable. The defense had already hinted they would tear the case apart. Yet none of that was what made the room uneasy. It was the child. 3-year-old Lily Harper sat on the second bench behind the prosecution table, her legs too short to touch the floor. They swung slightly, back and forth, the slow rhythm of a child who didn't understand why she was there, only that she had been told to sit still. She wore a pale blue dress with tiny white flowers, wrinkled from being worn too long in a stiff courtroom chair. Her light brown hair was tied into uneven pigtails that kept slipping loose. In her arms was a stuffed rabbit, pink once, now faded to a dull rose, its left ear permanently bent. Lily held it tightly, fingers curled deep into the fabric, as if letting go would cause something terrible to happen. No one noticed her at first. Why would they? The jurors whispered among themselves, glancing at the defendant, a thick-necked man in his 30s with a jagged scar along his jaw. His leg bounced uncontrollably beneath the table, his jaw clenched, eyes sharp and calculating. He looked nothing like a man who believed in innocence. The judge adjusted his glasses and scanned the room with practiced boredom. The lawyers prepared their opening statements, minds focused on strategy, timing, persuasion. A dozen spectators leaned forward in anticipation, hungry for drama. And then the side door opened. The bailiff's voice rang out, "All rise." Everyone stood as Judge Harold Whitman entered, his black robe flowing like a curtain closing on the outside world. He took his seat, nodded once, and the room settled again. "Bring in the K-9 unit," the judge said calmly. The door opened a second time. Rex entered with measured steps, nails clicking against the marble floor. He was a German shepherd, large and powerful, with a coat of deep black and tan that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. His posture was perfect, head high, back straight, eyes alert. A short leash connected him to Officer Daniel Cruz, his handler, a veteran cop with tired eyes and a rigid spine. Rex had been trained for chaos. Gunfire, screaming crowds, dark alleys soaked in adrenaline and fear. But the courtroom was different. The smell of polished wood, old paper, and anxiety hung in the air. Rex's ears flicked subtly, reading the room the way only a working dog could. His gaze passed over the jury, the judge, the defendant, then stopped. Locked. On Lily. The moment was so small that most people missed it. Just a pause, a fraction of a second where Rex didn't move. But Lily felt it. Her swinging legs slowed. Her fingers tightened around the stuffed rabbit. Slowly, carefully, she lifted her head. Her eyes met Rex. They were big eyes, curious, not afraid. Something inside the dog shifted. Officer Cruz felt it through the leash, a tension he couldn't name. Rex had stared down armed suspects without blinking. He had charged into danger on command. Yet now his breathing changed, shallow and uncertain. "Easy," Cruz whispered, barely moving his lips. Rex didn't respond. Lily tilted her head to the side, studying him the way children study the world, without assumptions, without fear, without understanding rules. Her lips parted slightly as if she were about to speak, but no sound came out. The prosecutor began speaking, his voice filling the room. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about courage. about a night when violence entered a quiet neighborhood. Rex didn't hear him. The defense attorney stood, packing slowly, eyes sharp. We intend to show that relying on an animal's instincts is dangerous and unreliable. Rex's ears twitched, but his gaze never left Lily. Lily shifted on the bench. Her mother, seated beside her, noticed too late. "Lily," she whispered urgently, placing a hand on her arm. "Sit still, sweetheart." Lily nodded absently, but then she did something no one expected. She stood up. The movement was small, almost invisible at first, a tiny body rising from a sea of adults, but it drew Rex's attention instantly. The leash tightened. Officer Cruz stiffened. "Rex," he murmured, firmer now. Rex stood too. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. "Officer." Cruz swallowed. "He's under control, Your Honor." But he wasn't sure. Rex took one step forward. Not aggressive, not defensive. Curious. Lily's stuffed rabbit slipped from her arms and landed softly on the floor. She didn't notice. Her eyes were locked on Rex, wide and searching, as if she were trying to remember something important. "Ma'am," the bailiff whispered urgently to Lily's mother, "keep her seated." Her mother's hand trembled as she reached for Lily again. "Please, baby, sit." Lily gently pulled away. She took one small step toward the aisle. The courtroom froze. The defendant leaned forward, squinting, irritated. "What is this?" he muttered. The jury watched, breath held. Rex's tail lowered, not stiff, not wagging. His body language changed in a way trained handlers rarely saw. His ears softened. His head dipped slightly. Recognition. Something old, something buried. Lily's voice, when it finally came, was quiet, barely louder than a whisper. Not words yet. Just a sound. A soft inhale, like she was about to cry, but didn't. The judge raised his hand. Order. But he didn't bring the gavel down. Because for the first time in his 30-year career, he didn't know whether stopping what was happening would be a mistake. Officer Cruz's heart pounded. Memories flashed through his mind. Sirens, blood, Rex whimpering in the dark, the night no one talked about. His grip tightened on the leash, knuckles whitening. Rex took another step. Lily mirrored him. They were only a few feet apart now. The room was so quiet that people could hear Rex breathing. Lily looked up at him, eyes shining with something too heavy for a child her age. Her lower lip trembled. And then, just before anyone could intervene, she spoke. And the sound of her voice would change everything that followed. The courtroom remained frozen, every adult unsure how to respond. Lawyers exchanged nervous glances, the jurors leaned forward, and the judge's pen hovered over his notes as if afraid to move. 3-year-old Lily Harper, small and fragile-looking, faced down the most disciplined police dog in the county. The tension was tangible, thick enough to press against the walls. Rex, the German shepherd, sat stiffly, his deep eyes locked on the child. Usually nothing fazed him. Gunfire, he'd charge head first. Threats, he'd face them without a second thought. Pain, he'd endure it silently. But here in this courtroom, under the glare of strangers, something in him wavered. Officer Daniel Cruz, his handler for years, felt his chest tighten. He knew every twitch of Rex's muscles, every subtle shift in his gaze, and he had never seen Rex like this. "Rex, heel," Cruz murmured, tugging lightly on the leash. The dog did not respond, not in the way he should. His tail dropped slightly, his ears rotated forward, and his usually rigid body softened. It was as though he recognized Lily in a way that no one else could understand. Cruz swallowed hard. The defense attorney straightened, smirking nervously. "Your Honor," he said, "this is absurd. A toddler cannot influence a trained K9. This is clearly a disruption." But his words faltered as Lily took another step forward, tiny shoes tapping against the polished marble. She didn't hesitate, didn't falter. Her eyes were wide and bright, filled with a strange mixture of innocence and courage. "Lily, stay back," her mother whispered, panic in her voice. But Lily ignored her, reaching the edge of the aisle. The crowd of onlookers leaned in. Every pair of eyes in the courtroom followed her, breath caught between disbelief and fear. Rex shifted his weight slightly, his head lowered, muzzle almost touching the floor as if inviting her closer. He made no move to bite, no growl, no defensive posture, just recognition. The prosecutor, a tall man with a booming voice, cleared his throat nervously. "This is highly unusual," he said. "Rex is a trained police dog. He responds only to commands from his handler." Cruz shook his head, unable to speak. He had trained Rex for years, seen him respond perfectly to stress, chaos, even gunfire, but never to a 3-year-old girl. Never like this. Lily stopped 3 feet away from Rex. Her small hands reached out, trembling, and she whispered something so faint that only Rex could hear. The German shepherd tilted his head, nostrils flaring as if he were trying to understand. The room felt as though it had shrunk. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows knit. He had presided over hundreds of trials, seen more courtroom drama than most people could imagine, but this defied logic. A child and a dog, staring each other down with an intensity that no adult could match. And then Lily spoke again, just 2 words. "You hurt." The words cut through the courtroom like shards of ice. A collective shiver ran through everyone present. The defense attorney froze mid-step, the jurors gasped, and the judge blinked rapidly. Rex whimpered softly, a sound no one had ever heard from him before. The handler's jaw tightened. He had never seen his dog show vulnerability in front of people. He knelt slightly to keep the leash steady, but his hands shook. The prosecutor's voice wavered. "Objection, well, not objection," he said, rubbing his forehead. "This is highly irregular." But no one moved to stop the child. She knelt slowly, reaching out to Rex. Her small hands rested on his chest, over the place where the dog had been injured during the robbery weeks before. The memory of that night came rushing back to Cruz, gunshots echoing in the empty convenience store, the suspect lunging with a knife, Rex leaping to protect the clerk, blood dripping from his side, pain hidden behind discipline. And now, this little girl, barely old enough to form sentences, had recognized it. Lily's mother began to shake, whispering, "Lily, honey, sit down, please." But Lily didn't respond. She looked up at the massive dog, her face a mixture of curiosity and fear and empathy. The defendant, sitting at the table with his attorney, leaned back in his chair. His smirk had faded. There was no bravado left, only something resembling fear. He watched Lily and Rex, realizing for the first time that the child might know more than anyone suspected. Rex's growl, low and soft, vibrated through the floor. It wasn't aggressive. It was protective. His body tensed slightly, eyes never leaving Lily. The dog's ears twitched forward, nostrils flared. He remembered that night, remembered the fear, remembered the pain, and he recognized the one person who understood. "Your Honor," Cruz whispered, voice tight, I don't think he'll respond to me right now. He's focused." The judge leaned back, uneasy. "This is highly irregular," he said, but even he could not deny the intensity in the room. Lily tilted her head. "Bad man," she said quietly, her tiny finger pointing toward the defendant. "Hurt Rex, hurt lady." A gasp went around the courtroom. The words confirmed what the prosecution had feared. The child had witnessed the crime. Worse, she had recognized it in Rex. The defendant's eyes widened. Sweat beaded along his forehead. He leaned forward, whispering to his attorney, but the words came out trembling, inaudible to the courtroom. The mask of confidence he had worn since arrest was gone. Rex let out another low whimper, shifting his weight closer to Lily. His nose brushed against her hand briefly. She flinched but didn't pull away. For the first time in public, Rex allowed himself to be vulnerable. Officer Cruz swallowed, torn between protocol and instinct. Every rule in his head screamed at him to regain control of the dog, yet a deeper understanding told him to let it happen. This child was different. She wasn't afraid. She was speaking to him in a way no adult could. The jurors leaned forward, eyes wide, silent witnesses to the bond forming in front of them. Cameras flashed. Some witnesses had secretly begun recording the moment. Social media would explode if this made it out of the courtroom. The judge cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Let's proceed carefully," he said, but even his words lacked authority now. Lily whispered something else, softer this time. "Don't be scared." Rex shifted again, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. His tail wagged slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough to show relief. The room exhaled collectively. And then Lily straightened, lifted her chin, and locked eyes with the defendant. Her tiny voice rang out with clarity and certainty, words no 3-year-old should be able to speak in a courtroom. "You hurt my friend." The silence that followed was suffocating. Every adult froze. The defendant's face went pale, his eyes darting around the room for an escape that didn't exist. Rex stood fully now, a massive wall of fur and muscle between the child and danger. The transformation was complete. He was alert, protective, and ready, but not angry, only resolute. The judge cleared his throat again. "Let's continue," he said shakily, unsure if he was presiding over a trial or a miracle. The room waited. No one spoke, no one moved. And in that moment it became clear. Something extraordinary was unfolding in Jefferson County Superior Court. A 3-year-old girl and a police dog, facing danger together, with the eyes of the world already beginning to watch. A moment like this didn't just happen. It was about to change everything. The courtroom had fallen into an eerie silence, the kind of stillness that made every breath audible. Lily Harper, barely 3 years old, stood mere feet from Rex, the decorated K-9 officer. She didn't move like a frightened child. She moved with a deliberateness that unsettled everyone. Her tiny shoes clicked softly against the marble floor, each tap punctuating the tension that thickened the air. Officer Daniel Cruz tightened his grip on Rex's leash, his knuckles whitening. He had trained this dog through gunfire, chaos, and life-or-death situations, yet never had he felt this kind of uncertainty. Rex wasn't responding to commands, not because he was disobedient, but because something inside him had shifted, something only Lily could reach. The judge leaned forward, adjusting his glasses repeatedly, clearly unsure whether to intervene. "Please, let's maintain order," he said, voice firm yet wavering. His words fell flat. Order didn't exist in this room anymore. The jurors were frozen, eyes wide. Some had seen traumatic crime scenes before, but nothing prepared them for this. A tiny child commanding the attention of a massive, disciplined police dog without a word of command. Every instinct told them this was dangerous. Every heart told them it was extraordinary. Lily tilted her head, studying Rex. Her pigtails swung gently with her movements. She squinted slightly, concentrating. The stuffed rabbit in her hand had been forgotten on the bench. It was as though she had entered a different world, one in which only she and Rex existed. Rex's ears flicked back, his breathing shallow. Officer Cruz whispered almost to himself, He's reading her like she's someone he knows." The defense attorney rose again, trying to regain composure. "Your Honor, this is absurd. This is manipulation of a trained K-9. I demand a recess until this child can be removed from the courtroom." The prosecutor shook his head. "Objection overruled. The child has a right to be here, and as the record shows, Rex's actions are part of the evidence." The defendant leaned back in his chair, his smirk gone, replaced by a flush of panic. He whispered something to his attorney, but his voice was trembling. For the first time, he was unsure of himself. Then Lily did something that no one anticipated. She took a slow, deliberate step toward Rex, her small hand lifting. Her fingers trembled, but her gaze never wavered. Rex shifted slightly in place. He did not growl, did not bark, did not display aggression. He simply lowered his massive head slightly and allowed her approach. It was a gesture of trust, of recognition. Her mother gasped, reaching out to stop her. "Lily, no." But Lily ignored her. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She pressed her tiny hand to Rex's chest, directly over the scar from the robbery night, the wound no one had spoken of publicly. A soft whimper escaped from Rex, a sound so foreign that the courtroom collectively flinched. The jurors were silent, some leaning in, eyes fixed. Their notebooks remained untouched. This was not about law anymore. This was about witnessing something pure and unexplainable. Rex's body tensed slightly, then relaxed. Officer Cruz tightened his grip on the leash again, but did not intervene. He was rooted to the spot, torn between following protocol and trusting what he instinctively knew was happening. Then Lily spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't be sad." The words carried weight beyond her age. The judge's gavel hovered, fingers wrapped around it, yet he didn't strike. He couldn't. Even he felt the electric charge of the moment, that fragile intersection of innocence and truth. The defense attorney's eyes narrowed. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. A child cannot provide testimony to a K-9's emotional state." The prosecutor shook his head slowly. "Sir, the child may not be testifying yet, but she has witnessed the crime, and the dog's response confirms it." The defendant's hands trembled. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering urgently, but no plan could undo the tension. Rex's eyes bore into him. The dog remembered the night of the robbery, the chaos, the stabbing, the blood, and now he had recognized someone who understood it. Lily's mother covered her mouth, silently urging her daughter to step back, but Lily stepped closer instead, looking up at Rex. "You were brave," she whispered. The dog's whimper turned into a low growl, not of aggression but of acknowledgement, recognition, pain remembered, fear confronted. The judge cleared his throat, attempting authority. We shall continue. Order must be maintained." But the words felt hollow. In that room, the law was secondary. The moment belonged to a small child and a brave dog, bound together by a shared memory of terror and trust. Lily took another step forward, now standing directly in front of Rex. She reached out both hands, touching his massive head. The dog lowered himself slightly, resting his forehead against her chest. Gasps erupted throughout the courtroom. Cameras flashed. Some spectators reached for their phones, capturing what could only be described as a miracle unfolding. Officer Cruz's heart pounded. "Stay calm, Rex," he whispered, though his voice lacked certainty. The dog remained still, as though answering a silent question. The prosecutor, shaking slightly, whispered to the judge, "Your Honor, she saw it. The crime. She witnessed it all." The defendant's eyes went wide, fear overtaking anger. The confidence he had maintained since his arrest was gone. He leaned back, hands trembling, realizing that a child and a dog now held truths that could not be silenced. Lily tilted her head, studying the man. Then she spoke two words that silenced the courtroom. "Bad man." The words landed like stones. Every juror, every spectator, every lawyer froze. The defendant's face paled. The dog's growl deepened, low and menacing, but protective, not attacking. Rex's gaze returned to Lily, softening, almost as if asking for reassurance. She reached out and whispered again. "He hurt you." Rex's whimper became audible. Officer Cruz exhaled slowly, realizing that no training could have prepared him for this. The dog was acknowledging his pain, and Lily was acknowledging it too. The courtroom hung in suspended disbelief. Cameras flashed. The judge's hand hovered over the gavel. The defendant trembled in his chair. Everyone could sense that something monumental had shifted. And then, just as the tension peaked, Lily's tiny finger pointed directly at the defendant. "Did this to you," she said softly, voice filled with certainty that chilled the room. The moment was frozen in time. Everyone knew the trial had changed irreversibly. The child had seen more than anyone could imagine, and Rex had confirmed it without words. The judge leaned back, his face pale. We will proceed," he said, voice barely audible. But no one could ignore the weight of what had just happened. Something extraordinary had unfolded, and no one in Jefferson County had ever witnessed anything like it. And outside the walls of the courtroom, reporters were already tweeting, live streaming and whispering that a 3-year-old girl had just commanded the attention of a decorated police dog, and in doing so, might have just solved a crime that seemed untouchable. The silence lingered, thick and suffocating. Everyone waited for the next move, knowing that whatever happened next would decide everything. Because Lily Harper wasn't just a child, and Rex wasn't just a dog. Together they were about to change the course of the trial, and no one could predict how far it would go. The courtroom had become a stage for something no one could have predicted. Every person present, jurors, lawyers, spectators, even the judge, was holding their breath. The air was thick with anticipation, tension, and disbelief. And at the center of it all stood Lily Harper, 3 years old, trembling slightly but holding herself with a courage that belied her age. Her small hand rested gently on Rex's chest, right over the place where the dog had been injured during the robbery weeks earlier. The scar, hidden beneath his fur, told the story of fear, bravery, and pain, an unspoken record that Lily somehow understood. She tilted her head and whispered words no one in the room expected. "You cried." The words were soft, almost a whisper, but they cut through the courtroom like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted from the spectators. A few jurors dropped their pencils. Some blinked rapidly, as if to convince themselves they had heard correctly. The defense attorney froze mid-sentence, jaw slack. Even the judge leaned forward in disbelief, adjusting his glasses over eyes that had seen nearly everything. Rex's reaction was immediate and undeniable. A low, shuddering whimper escaped his throat, startling everyone. He shifted his weight slightly, resting his head closer to Lily. For the first time since his training began, the decorated K9 showed a trace of vulnerability, a crack in the armor he had carried through every dangerous encounter. Officer Daniel Cruz, normally calm and commanding, felt a lump form in his throat. He gripped the leash tighter, but inside he was fighting a wave of emotion he had never anticipated. Rex had been through gunfire, knives, and chaos, but Lily, this tiny child, had reached something inside him that no officer or command could ever touch. The courtroom fell deathly silent. Every whisper, cough, and shuffle of paper ceased. It was as if time itself had stopped, waiting for what would come next. The defense attorney straightened, trying to regain control. "Your Honor," he began, his voice sharp but shaking, "a 3-year-old cannot." "You can speak all you want, sir," Judge Whitman interrupted, voice surprisingly soft. "But the child is here, and she may have witnessed events pertinent to this case. Let's proceed with caution." The defendant, whose arrogance had carried him through much of the pretrial process, was visibly shaking. His eyes darted toward Rex and then back at Lily, confusion and fear battling with his usual bravado. He leaned toward his attorney and whispered something inaudible, his hands trembling on the table. But Lily was not deterred. She squatted slightly to Rex's level, touching the thick fur over his chest. Her voice, though tiny, carried a weight no one could deny. "Bad man hurt you," she said softly. The words landed like stones. Every person in the courtroom froze again, this time not just in disbelief, but in the dawning realization that Lily knew something critical, something the adult witnesses hadn't shared. Rex let out a soft whine, nudging her hand gently with his nose. It was a quiet acknowledgement, a confirmation that her words were true. He remembered the night of the robbery, remembered the fear, remembered the pain, and now he had someone who recognized it. Officer Cruz swallowed hard. He knows she understands," he muttered to himself. "I've never seen him react like this." The jurors, once detached and clinical, now leaned forward, their eyes wide. Some wiped tears from their faces. Cameras flashed. Social media reporters were already live streaming the moment. A 3-year-old girl, alone in her innocence, confronting the trauma of a decorated police dog. The prosecutor stood slowly, clearing his throat. "Your Honor," he said, voice tight with emotion, "the child is revealing that she witnessed the crime, and Rex's reaction confirms it. We may have a unique situation here where the K-9's response corroborates her observations." The defense attorney shook his head, looking both furious and helpless. "Your Honor, this is absurd. This is manipulation. A child cannot." "Silence," the judge snapped, though his voice carried both authority and awe. "We will continue. This is part of the trial, whether anyone likes it or not." Meanwhile, the defendant's panic was visible. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His carefully constructed world of denial and arrogance was crumbling in front of a toddler and a dog. For the first time, fear crossed his face. Lily's mother finally rose from her seat, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Lily, honey," she began, but Lily ignored her, focusing entirely on Rex. The child knelt down slightly, bringing her face closer to his. She whispered again, almost inaudible, but this time loud enough for Officer Cruz to hear. "Don't be scared." Rex's low growl shifted, vibrating through the polished courtroom floor. It was no longer a sound of warning or aggression. It was a sound of recognition, of acknowledgement, of understanding. The dog's massive body shifted to stand protectively beside Lily, tail lowered, ears forward. Every adult in the room felt the weight of the moment. Jurors stared, some with wide-eyed disbelief, some with tears threatening to fall. Reporters adjusted their cameras, realizing that the footage of this moment would go viral, would be replayed endlessly. A tiny child, unarmed, confronting the remnants of a violent night and receiving validation from a dog who had faced death to protect a stranger. The defendant slumped back into his chair, shaking. His attorney whispered something that fell on deaf ears. No words could undo what had just occurred. Then Lily did something even more astonishing. She raised a tiny finger and pointed at the man sitting at the defense table. Her voice, small but unmistakable, rang out. "You did this." The courtroom froze. Every pair of eyes, every camera, every note-taker, every heart in that room paused. Rex growled softly, the sound low and threatening, but his eyes never left Lily. He wasn't attacking. He was protecting, acknowledging, and confirming. The judge, voice trembling slightly, said, We will proceed carefully." But even he could feel the extraordinary weight of the moment. A child had spoken, and a dog had responded in ways that defied explanation, but no one could deny the truth that hung in the air like a tangible presence. Lily's small hand continued to rest on Rex's chest, the dog's head leaning into her touch. It was a moment of silent communication, a bridge between innocence and courage, trauma and understanding. And outside the walls of the courtroom, the world was already beginning to take notice. A 3-year-old child and a police dog had changed the trajectory of a criminal trial with 2 words. The moment ended not with a bang, but with a quiet intensity that made every adult present aware of something profound, something life-changing. Because in that courtroom, for the first time, everyone understood. Lily Harper was not just a child. Rex was not just a dog. Together, they were witnesses in a way that no one, no human, no law, no procedure could have anticipated. And the room waited for what would come next. What Lily said next would confirm everything and shock the courtroom completely. The courtroom was electric, yet silent. Every person present felt the weight of Lily Harper's words and Rex's response. No one had ever seen a 3-year-old and a police dog communicate with such clarity, such understanding. The tension pressed down on the room, suffocating in its intensity. Even the judge leaned forward, hands gripping the edge of the bench, uncertain how to proceed. Officer Daniel Cruz adjusted his grip on Rex's leash. His eyes darted nervously to the defendant, whose face was pale, sweat glistening along his temples. The man was no longer arrogant. He was trembling, realizing the power of what he had just witnessed. The prosecutor, sensing the momentum shift, stood tall. "Your Honor," he began, voice steady despite the emotion in the room, "I believe we may need to call the handler to testify regarding the events of the robbery night. Rex's reactions are consistent with an attack that involved injury to the dog, and now a child corroborates what was previously unseen." The judge nodded slowly, adjusting his glasses. "Proceed carefully, but yes, the testimony is necessary." Cruz stepped forward, the leash held firmly but loosely enough to let Rex move freely. I wasn't going to bring this up yet," he admitted, voice tight, "but the child has already seen it." He paused, swallowing. "The night of the robbery, things went wrong, very wrong." The courtroom collectively leaned in. Some jurors shifted in their seats, even the spectators stopped fidgeting. Every eye was on Cruz. "That night," he continued, voice low, "Rex and I responded to a call at the neighborhood convenience store around midnight. The suspect was armed. He ambushed us, knives drawn. Rex charged to protect the clerk. Shots were fired. Rex was stabbed, barely making it out alive. I never spoke publicly about the extent of his injuries, and footage was sealed." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The defense attorney's face went pale. His whispers to the defendant were frantic, but drowned by the collective shock in the room. Then the truth emerged, something that no one expected. Lily Harper, the 3-year-old child who had become the center of attention, had been hiding in the store that night. She had watched everything. The courtroom gasped audibly. The jurors' jaws dropped. The defendant's hands shook so violently that his lawyer had to grab his arm. Sweat dripped down his forehead. His mask of composure had been shattered completely. Lily's mother began to shake, tears streaming down her face. "Honey, no, we weren't supposed to talk about this," she whispered. But Lily remained composed. She stood beside Rex, her small hand resting on his chest, and looked toward the defendant with unwavering clarity. She didn't speak the words adults would say. She didn't need to. Her eyes alone told the story of the horrors she had seen. Cruz swallowed and continued, forcing himself to remain professional. "Rex, he remembers every detail, every movement of the suspect, every scream. He remembers the blood, the fear, and he still responds to it. And now the child has recognized it, validated it." The judge leaned back in his chair, voice trembling. "So, the child was present during the incident?" "Yes, Your Honor," Cruz said. "She saw everything, and Rex remembers too. That's why he reacted the way he did just now." The defense attorney tried to interject. "Your Honor, this is..." But the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "Let him speak." The defendant, realizing the walls of his world were collapsing, whispered something to his lawyer. His voice trembled. She saw me." "Yes," the attorney replied, pale-faced. Rex's head shifted slightly, resting gently against Lily's shoulder. His deep brown eyes locked onto the defendant, filled with a mixture of recognition, pain, and protective instinct. The defendant's face went white as he realized that this dog, who had faced death for his life, now knew him intimately, and the child did too. The prosecutor's voice grew firmer. "Your Honor, this testimony is critical. It confirms that the suspect..." The defendant tried to interrupt, but Lily's tiny finger shot out, pointing straight at him. "Did this," she said, voice clear and unwavering. The courtroom went silent. Every adult froze. The gravity of a toddler accusing an adult with complete certainty was unprecedented. Rex growled softly, low in his chest, a warning, not an attack. Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered, realizing that the story they were witnessing could go viral instantly. A 3-year-old girl and a decorated police dog had effectively identified the perpetrator and confirmed details that had been sealed by law enforcement. Cruz continued, voice steady but low. After the stabbing, officers arrived to secure the scene. The clerk was safe, barely conscious. The suspect fled but was later apprehended. Rex was treated immediately, but the injuries were serious. He's still recovering physically and emotionally, but he recognizes the danger. And Lily, she understood it too. The jurors scribbled notes frantically, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The defendant's attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but it was clear. No strategy could undo what had happened. Lily's testimony, though unspoken in traditional legal terms, had changed the course of the trial. Lily knelt again, placing her small hands over Rex's scarred chest. She whispered softly, words almost inaudible to anyone but the dog. "You're safe now." Rex exhaled slowly, leaning into her touch. For the first time in weeks, his body relaxed, though his protective gaze never wavered. The judge leaned forward, voice heavy with emotion. "This is extraordinary. Both the child and the dog are confirming events that were previously hidden from the court. We will proceed with this information carefully." The defendant's hands shook uncontrollably. Sweat poured down his face. He looked at Lily, realizing the innocence of her age had somehow become his greatest adversary. The bravery of a toddler and the loyalty of a dog had exposed him. The courtroom waited, every eye focused on the small girl and the massive K9. Outside, the world was already buzzing. Social media feeds would light up with the story of Lily and Rex. News anchors would replay it endlessly. And inside, the trial was no longer just about evidence or law. It was about truth, courage, and recognition. Lily Harper had seen the night of terror. Rex had survived it. And together, they were about to ensure that justice would be undeniable. The next move, Lily's testimony, would seal everything. Because some truths, no matter how small the messenger, could not be ignored. The courtroom was tense, the air vibrating with anticipation. Every juror, every lawyer, every spectator was aware that something extraordinary was unfolding. A 3-year-old child had just corroborated events of a violent robbery night, and Rex, a massive German shepherd decorated for bravery, had responded in a way that defied logic but spoke volumes. Officer Daniel Cruz stood beside Rex, his hands gripping the leash with a mixture of authority and nervousness. "Stay calm, Rex," he murmured under his breath, though he knew the dog's mind was elsewhere. The K9 wasn't just reacting to commands, he was reacting to memory, to recognition, to truth. Lily knelt beside Rex, her small hands pressed gently against his scarred chest. Her face was calm but intensely focused. The courtroom had fallen into a hushed silence, the kind that presses against your skin and rattles your lungs. Every sound, the shuffling of papers, the quiet hum of fluorescent lights, was amplified by the tension. The defense attorney was visibly panicking. He tugged at the defendant's sleeve, whispering frantic instructions. But the man couldn't hear him over the rhythm of his own heartbeat, which had tripled in speed. Sweat poured down his face. The mask of arrogance he had carried for weeks was gone. The judge, normally impervious to theatrics, leaned forward on his bench. His hands gripped the wood as he watched, clearly unsure how to proceed. He had presided over countless cases, but nothing had ever prepared him for this. A child and a dog, standing together, communicating a shared trauma with clarity that no adult could dispute. Rex shifted, his massive body lowering slightly. His eyes, deep brown and intelligent, locked onto the defendant. It was no longer a playful or casual gaze. It was recognition, a remembrance of the violence that had occurred months before. The dog's nostrils flared, and a low growl resonated in his chest, a sound that made even hardened officers shiver. "Your Honor," Officer Cruz began, voice steady but low, "Rex, he remembers everything from that night. The suspect, the weapons, the struggle, the pain. He recognizes the threat, and he recognizes the child who witnessed it all. I've never seen him react this way in a controlled environment." The defendant's hands shook violently. His eyes darted to Rex, then to Lily, then to the judge. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words emerged. Panic clouded his features. For the first time in his life, he understood that the truth could not be hidden. Lily tilted her head slightly, looking up at the dog. "He scared you," she whispered softly. Her words were gentle, but the courtroom fell silent again. The jurors leaned in, trying to catch every nuance of the moment. The prosecutor adjusted his notes but didn't speak, realizing that nothing he said could compete with the silent communication between the girl and the dog. Rex's growl deepened, low and threatening, but he didn't move toward the child. Instead, he stepped protectively in front of her, blocking the defendant. His body was rigid, muscles coiled, eyes fixed. It was a warning, stay back. The dog had chosen his role, and it was clear who he was protecting. The defendant recoiled. Sweat poured down his forehead as the realization set in. This dog, who had survived knives and bullets, now recognized him as the man responsible for pain and fear. And the child, small and innocent, had confirmed it. "Lily," Officer Cruz said softly, "he's not going to hurt you. He's protecting you." The girl nodded slightly, her fingers brushing the fur of Rex's chest. "Safe now," she whispered. The K9 exhaled softly, leaning into her touch, the tension in his massive body easing ever so slightly, but his gaze never wavered from the defendant. The judge cleared his throat, voice trembling. We shall continue. But the court recognizes that this K9's response is relevant, particularly given the child's observations. The jurors scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Every note, every observation now carried unprecedented weight. The room wasn't just observing a trial, it was witnessing a living confirmation of events that had been hidden from the public. The defendant's attorney leaned close, whispering in his ear, but his client's eyes never left Rex. The man's body language screamed terror. He had been powerful, arrogant, untouchable, but the combined presence of a child who had witnessed the crime and a dog who had endured it made him small, exposed, and utterly vulnerable. Rex's growl escalated slightly, a vibration that went through the floorboards and rattled the benches. It was a reminder to the defendant that the dog had faced death and survived. He remembered the fear, the blood, the chaos, and he recognized the man who had caused it. Lily's small hand moved slightly, brushing the scar on Rex's chest again. "It's okay," she said softly. Her voice was gentle but filled with authority beyond her years. The courtroom felt the weight of her words. The jurors' eyes widened. The witnesses, previously skeptical of a child's perception, now realized that Lily had seen more than any adult had assumed. Her observations, combined with Rex's behavior, created a narrative so compelling that the defense could barely challenge it. The prosecutor, seizing the moment, spoke carefully. "Your Honor, the child and the K9's interactions are corroborating evidence. It confirms the suspect's presence and actions during the crime. The jury can see the direct recognition and the protective response from the dog. It's undeniable." The defense attorney's face was pale. He opened his mouth to object but found no words capable of undoing the scene in front of him. The child and the dog had spoken louder than any argument. The judge nodded slowly. "Very well. We will proceed with the understanding that the K9's response is significant and that the child's observations are relevant." Rex leaned his massive head against Lily once more, softening slightly but keeping his gaze fixed. The protective energy radiating from him was palpable. The defendant's body trembled, realizing that every attempt to manipulate the truth had been undone by two unlikely witnesses, a small child and a dog who had survived terror. Lily whispered again, quiet enough that only Rex could hear. "He scared you, but you're okay now." The courtroom exhaled collectively. Cameras flashed, jurors blinked rapidly, and even the judge allowed a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was clear. The truth had been illuminated. The suspect's crimes were no longer hidden, the victim's experiences validated, and the bravery of a child and a dog had become undeniable evidence. And outside the courtroom, the story of Lily and Rex was already spreading. People would soon know how a tiny witness and a decorated K9 had combined to reveal the hidden horrors of a violent night, and how justice could be seen, felt, and understood without a single word of traditional testimony. The next step was inevitable. Lily Harper would testify, officially this time, confirming everything she had already revealed, and Rex would remain her steadfast guardian, ensuring that no one could challenge the truth she had witnessed. The courtroom waited, hearts pounding, knowing that what was about to happen would seal the fate of a man who had underestimated the courage of a 3-year-old and the memory of a loyal police dog. Because some truths, no matter how small the messenger or how powerful the witness, cannot be denied, the courtroom had reached a fever pitch. Every eye was fixed on the small figure of Lily Harper, kneeling beside Rex, her tiny hands resting on his scarred chest. The jurors scribbled notes frantically, trying to record everything. The subtle shift of Rex's weight, the low growl vibrating in his chest, the determined look in the girl's eyes. Even the judge leaned forward, his hands gripping the bench, utterly captivated. This wasn't just testimony, this was revelation. Lily's mother tried once more to intervene, whispering, "Lily, honey, sit down," but the child shook her head. Her expression was resolute. She wasn't just a witness, she was a storyteller, a survivor. Officer Daniel Cruz glanced at her, his jaw tight. He trained Rex for years, guided him through the chaos of armed robberies and violent confrontations, but this was something else entirely. He nodded subtly, signaling that she could proceed. Rex remained at her side, his massive head lowered protectively, eyes fixed on the defendant. The room fell silent. The defendant, a man used to control, realized he no longer had any. His attorney leaned over, whispering frantically, but the words fell on deaf ears. Every instinct told him that what was about to happen could destroy him. Lily lifted her small hand, pointing directly at the man who had caused so much fear and pain. Her voice, though soft, was unwavering. "That man hurt the dog. He hurt the lady he ran." A collective gasp echoed through the room. Jurors leaned forward, some wiping tears from their eyes. The defense attorney's face turned pale. He whispered something frantic to his client, but the man's eyes never left Lily. Panic had replaced arrogance entirely. Rex let out a low growl, his massive frame tense. He shifted slightly, stepping protectively in front of Lily, his head tilted toward the defendant. It was a silent warning, a reminder that the dog had survived chaos, and he remembered. The prosecutor took a cautious step forward, voice measured but firm. "Your Honor, the child's testimony, combined with the K9's response, corroborates the sequence of events on the night of the robbery. The suspect's actions are confirmed by both a witness and a trained police dog." The judge nodded slowly. "Proceed." Lily's small fingers wiggled as she gestured, pointing at Rex's scarred chest. "He stabbed Rex," she said simply, almost matter-of-factly. "I saw it. He hurt him and ran away." The courtroom froze. A 3-year-old had just recounted events of a violent crime with clarity and accuracy. The jurors scribbled furiously, noting not just her words but her demeanor, calm, precise, fearless. Rex growled again, low and threatening, a reminder of his presence, his memory, and his loyalty. The defendant swallowed hard, realizing the gravity of the moment. His smirk was gone, replaced by raw, unadulterated fear. Lily continued, her small voice unwavering. "He took money, he scared the lady, Rex jumped. He got hurt, he cried." Each word hit the room like a hammer. Cameras flashed. Spectators whispered. The defense attorney was visibly shaking, glancing desperately at the judge, at the jurors, anywhere for a lifeline. But there was none. Rex shifted again, leaning slightly into Lily. He let out a small whimper, almost as if to affirm her words. Officer Cruz's eyes glistened, understanding the depth of what had just happened. A child had described the crime, and the dog, trained, disciplined, fearless, had reacted in a way that validated every single detail. The defendant's hands trembled. He tried to speak, to protest, but the words stuck in his throat. The fear was raw, the understanding clear. He had been exposed. Lily's innocence and bravery, combined with Rex's memory and protection, left him powerless. The jurors were silent, some leaning forward so far it was as if they could enter the moment themselves. Every nuance mattered: the way Lily pointed, the way Rex shifted, the way the defendant froze. Social media reporters in the gallery clicked away, live streaming the scene that was already beginning to go viral. Lily's mother, tears streaming down her cheeks, whispered softly, "You're doing so well, baby." But Lily barely registered the words. She was focused entirely on the truth she had witnessed and the dog she had protected. "Did he run?" one of the jurors asked quietly, almost to themselves. Lily nodded solemnly. "Yes, he ran away, but Rex chased him. He got caught." A low murmur spread through the courtroom. The pieces of the crime were being laid bare in a way that no evidence, no testimony, no document could replicate. It was raw, it was real, and it was undeniable. Rex leaned closer, his head brushing Lily's shoulder, exhaling softly. The dog's body language was protective, affirming, and solemn. He had remembered every detail of that night, and now he stood as silent witness to the child who had shared it. The defense attorney finally spoke, voice shaking. "Objection, the child is too young." The judge's gavel hit the bench. "Overruled," he said, voice firm. "The child witnessed the crime, and her observations are relevant and corroborated by the K-9 officer's response. Proceed." Lily's small finger returned to the defendant, pointing with unwavering certainty. "He did it," she said plainly. Rex growled low again, a sound that sent a chill through everyone present. It was protective, warning, confirming. The defendant flinched visibly. His hands shook. Every instinct screamed at him. He had been caught. The courtroom was silent, save for the quiet hum of anticipation. The jurors scribbled, the spectators held their breath, and the judge leaned back, clearly aware that he was witnessing something extraordinary. Lily knelt beside Rex again, pressing her tiny hands gently against his chest. "You're safe now," she whispered, voice soft but resolute. The dog exhaled, leaning into her touch. The fear and pain of the night were still there, but now there was comfort, protection, and validation. The prosecutor stepped forward, voice steady. "Your Honor, this testimony confirms the sequence of events, the defendant's actions, and the bravery of the K-9 officer. The child's account, corroborated by Rex's behavior, cannot be disputed." The defense attorney looked around desperately, realizing that no argument could counteract what had just transpired. The defendant sat frozen, utterly exposed. Every camera, every phone, every observer in the room recorded the scene. A tiny child and a loyal police dog standing together, exposing a violent criminal with nothing more than truth, courage, and recognition. The room exhaled collectively. The narrative had been set. The evidence was undeniable. And outside the walls of the courthouse, the story of Lily and Rex would explode across the nation. The judge leaned forward, voice quiet but firm. "We will now proceed to closing statements, but the court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances of this testimony and the corroborating evidence presented by the K-9 officer." Lily stood, brushing her dress gently, her eyes still fixed on Rex. The dog nudged her hand, and she smiled softly, understanding the bond they shared. The courtroom had witnessed something that would be remembered for decades, a child and a dog exposing truth in a way no adult could replicate. And as the jurors prepared to deliberate, the defendant's panic reached its peak. He had underestimated the smallest witness and the most loyal of animals. Now he was powerless. Because some truths, spoken by the tiniest voices and confirmed by the bravest hearts, cannot be denied. The courtroom waited, breathless, for the final verdict that would seal the fate of the man who had tried to hide behind fear and deception. The courtroom was tense, the air so thick it seemed to press down on every chest. Hours had passed since Lily Harper had revealed everything she had seen the night of the robbery. Every adult in the room, jurors, lawyers, spectators, even the judge, felt the weight of what had just transpired. A 3-year-old child and a decorated police dog had exposed a violent crime in a way that no testimony, no surveillance, and no report could replicate. Rex sat obediently beside Lily, massive frame relaxed but alert, eyes constantly tracking the defendant. He had survived knives and gunfire, but the most intense moment of his career was now. The moment he stood beside a child who had seen everything and confirmed the truth. Officer Daniel Cruz adjusted his grip on Rex's leash, breathing steadily but with a sense of awe. The dog had performed flawlessly, not just as a trained officer, but as a living witness to terror, trauma, and survival. Cruz knew that what they had just seen would become a defining moment in police history. The jurors had retired to deliberate, but the anticipation in the room was electric. Everyone, spectators, courtroom staff, the press, waited for the moment when justice would finally be delivered. The defendant sat pale, sweat pouring down his face, hands trembling uncontrollably. His lawyer whispered frantically, but the man barely acknowledged him. The arrogance that had carried him through the pretrial proceedings had completely crumbled. Lily sat quietly beside Rex, gently stroking his head. "Good boy," she whispered softly, the sound barely audible, yet carrying a weight that seemed to settle the entire room. The dog leaned into her touch, nostrils flaring slightly as if savoring the validation. The judge cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury have reached a verdict," he announced, voice steady but heavy with emotion. Everyone in the room held their breath. The defendant's attorney leaned forward, whispering urgently, but his client barely registered the words. The courtroom clerk stood and began to read. In the case of the state versus Jonathan Kincaid, the jury finds the defendant. A pause. Every person leaned forward instinctively. Even the press stopped typing, cameras zoomed in, and spectators held their collective breath. Guilty on all counts of armed robbery, assault, and attempted murder. A wave of audible gasps and murmurs swept through the courtroom. Some jurors wept quietly, spectators clapped softly, overcome with emotion. The defendant's face turned ashen, his hands falling limp to his lap. For the first time in his life, he had no power, no escape, no defense. Lily clapped her small hands softly, a smile spreading across her face. "Rex did it," she said proudly, nudging the dog. Rex's ears twitched, and he let out a soft, approving whine, resting his head on her tiny shoulder. Officer Cruz exhaled, finally allowing himself a moment of relief. The K-9 had done more than survive. He had testified in his own way that justice would be served. The prosecutor approached Lily carefully, kneeling to her level. "You were very brave," he said, voice warm. "You helped make sure the right thing happened." Lily nodded, looking at Rex. "We did it," she said simply. Her small words carried an enormous weight, a declaration that courage can come from the smallest and most unlikely places. The judge addressed the courtroom, voice firm but gentle. "This case will be remembered not just for the crime, but for the courage of a child and the loyalty of a police dog. Justice has been served today because truth, bravery, and honesty prevailed." The spectators stood, clapping softly. Some cried quietly. The defendant was led away in handcuffs, his face pale and hollow. For months he had hidden behind lies and fear. Now he faced the consequences of his actions, exposed by the very innocence he had underestimated. Rex received his moment of recognition next. Officer Cruz unhooked the leash briefly, allowing the massive dog to receive commendations from the court and law enforcement officers present. Medals were pinned to his vest, hands stroked his fur, and yet Rex remained calm, leaning gently against Lily. The small girl hugged the dog's massive head, pressing her cheek to his fur. Cameras captured the image: a tiny child and a massive police dog, symbols of bravery, loyalty, and the unshakable power of truth. Social media exploded within minutes, shares and posts multiplying as people around the world marveled at the story that had unfolded in Jefferson County Superior Court. Lily's mother wiped her tears, overwhelmed by the bravery of her daughter. "You were incredible," she whispered, holding her close, but Lily was already looking at Rex, smiling with quiet pride. "We did it," she said again, and the dog's low whine seemed to acknowledge the truth of her statement. Officer Cruz knelt, patting Rex on the side. "You were amazing tonight," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You protected her and you helped make sure justice was done." Rex's tail thumped softly against the floor. He had endured fear, chaos, and pain, but now he had witnessed the power of trust, courage, and innocence. He had stood as a protector, a witness, and a hero. As the courtroom began to empty, the story of Lily and Rex remained imprinted in everyone's minds. The defendant had been convicted. Justice had been served. And yet, the image of a tiny girl and a massive police dog, standing together to reveal the truth, would linger long after the trial concluded. Lily waved goodbye to the court officers and jurors, her small hand resting on Rex's fur. Officer Cruz clipped the leash back onto his harness. "Time to go home," he said softly. Lily looked up at him. "Rex is my friend," she said firmly. "Yes," Cruz replied with a small smile, "always your friend." And outside the courthouse, the crowd had gathered, reporters snapping photos, social media buzzing, local news cameras rolling. People were already calling it a story for the ages, a 3-year-old girl and a police dog who had changed everything. The tiny girl held Rex's massive paw, looking up at him with awe and gratitude. The dog leaned down, pressing his head against her shoulder. In that quiet moment, no one else existed. Not the cameras, not the crowd, not the courtroom drama. Just trust, courage, and the unspoken bond between a child and a hero. For a moment the world felt right. Justice had been served, truth had been honored, and courage, no matter how small the source, had triumphed. Lily Harper had spoken, Rex had remembered, and together they had changed everything. The courtroom doors closed behind them, but the story would live forever. An unshakable reminder that bravery doesn't depend on size, and heroes can come in all shapes and forms. And as they walked out into the sunlight, Lily holding her friend's paw, the world outside could only watch in awe, knowing they had just witnessed something extraordinary. The end.